short answer how you prevent people from misreading you is to communicate. If you communicate well and clearly and honestly, I think other countries, other people respect it and accept it. Now, if you go around the world, actually, a lot of people are very proud of what they are about, what is their culture, tradition, heritage, and what is the persona, in a way. I see no reason why we should not be. I mean, after all, if you look at it, there are really very, very few ancient civilizations which have survived to become major modern nation states. And we are one of them. We have a sense of our past, which very few countries have. I mean, I can count those countries on the fingers of one hand, and not too many fingers at that. So we have, there is a lot that we have which is in us. It's something which is inherited, it's part of our belief system. Nobody needs to teach us that. You actually, in many ways, you pick it up, in your surroundings, in your homes. It is there in our language, in the concepts and metaphors we use. So how do you actually bring, it's like almost you have tools inside you, but you are not using those tools because your education system or the dominant intellectual stream is replaced it with some external tools. I have nothing against those. I mean, they also add to your capabilities. But how do you bring out those internal, tools and mechanisms and creativity and energies which are inside us and express them? And it's again part of an evolution because, after all 200 years, after a Western-dominated world, it is now 80 years since much of Asia and Africa and Latin America regained their independence. And in those 200 years, their own cultures got suppressed. So I think your question, how do you make sure this is not anti-Western? I think it's non-Western, and it's important for us to explain to the West that, look, there was a period of distortion where the natural diversity of the world was suppressed, and that diversity is now returning, and that diversity doesn't have to be threatening. That diversity will coexist with the West. In many ways, it would actually reinforce a lot of things the West believes in. One example which I cite in one of my books is it was our decision to opt for a democratic political model, which actually made the very idea of democracy as a universal political concept. That had we not gone that way, I think the democratic model as we know it would have been actually very, very regional and very narrow. And I would say it's our right, I would say almost a duty, our obligation to, express our thoughts and our values and our culture and our history. But it can be done in a congenial partnership kind of way, because I think that partnership with the West is important. I think it is very much a way of how we shape the world. I don't see that as a either or choice. If you look at the history of the world, countries have not grown by saying, I'll grow at home and I'll have nothing to do with abroad because it's a waste of my resources or it's a subtraction of my resources and energy from home. In fact, countries have grown by growing at home, then engaging abroad, leveraging the international environment, in a way contributing to it, gaining from it, and to me, being, see, when we again use this word so sometimes so casually, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, what is actually the messaging of that word, of that term? The term is that we have never considered the world as an inimical or a hostile environment from which we have to defensively protect ourselves. Now, yes, we have limitations on our resources, less than we had, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But nevertheless, we do. Now, if you are in a problem-solving mode, with limited resources, how do you have maximum impact? That is actually the problem which has to be solved. And what we try to do in Indian foreign policy today, in Indian diplomacy today, is actually solve that problem. And we try to do that by partly using our competitiveness, using our strengths, leveraging other institutions and possibilities. I'll give you an example. I would say, even to me, an IIT Madras campus in Tanzania is a way by which Indian foreign policy has leveraged the capabilities of an institution here to make a huge impact there. That is something I want to talk about. But I would, make this statement. In my entire career, which is quite long, I have never seen anything having a greater emotional impact on the rest of the world than giving vaccines. I've actually had people who tear up when they remember the first vaccine shipment. So, if you remember, look, COVID was a bad memory. We have put it all behind us. You try to actually get it out as much of your system as possible. But at that time, there were countries, there were developed countries, Western countries, some of them, who had stocked up 8 times the number of vaccines of their population. Nobody is going to take 8 doses, okay? But there were countries, and big countries, who had 8 times the vaccine stock of their population, and next to them were small countries to whom they were not willing to give 10,000 doses, okay? Now, when you had somebody who had, first of all, responsibility of 1.4 billion, and then on top of it who had initiated the program. We were still in the middle of it, and we felt at that time that many of these countries should not, giving them 100,000, 200,000 doses was something which would be a gesture of solidarity. It would be make or break for them. And it was something we could do, and we could explain to our people why we could do it. And I can tell you, it is something even today. Today, we talk less about vaccines. I hear it actually when I go out. When I go to Latin America, when I go to small island states, people from the Caribbean, people from the Pacific, many of them say, look, we had no chance of getting within smelling distance of vaccine, but for the fact that So I mentioned that as an example that, we were the world's most efficient producers of vaccines. The same if you look, at that time, my my second job was in a way a sort of a supply chain and oversight minister for some of this, because a lot of the supply chain was actually outside the country. And again, people don't realize it was very important to have that global connect and that global responsibility, because the world also helped us. I think that's something, so that the product could be made in India. And we had a moral obligation. Not all countries at that time necessarily fulfilled it. So the bottom line, I would say, is don't think of it as home and abroad, why am I doing this for the world when I still have problems at home. We have to, we'll steady up at home, we'll build up at home, but at the same time, you don't not do foreign policy because you got domestic problems. They've got to walk hand in hand. You have to do both at that time. And the example I gave of IIT Madras, I had the privilege of going to Zanzibar, of seeing the opening of that institution. But I was just thinking to myself at that time, and again today when I came, think 10 years from now. Think 10 years from now, how many students of Africa would have passed through its portals? Look at the impact that we would have on the minds of people who in their own countries would be economic and technology leaders. It's an investment beyond value. You will shape, and remember, some, decades ago, others used to do it. If you look at the way I'm giving you as an example, how American universities shape the image of America abroad. So today, I would say education for us, particularly higher education, and skills. I would take it beyond education to innovation, to talent promotion, nurturing. This is an area which I feel at the end of the day, there are oil powers, there are resource powers. We are a human resource power, and we should play to our strengths. We now have the capability to start doing so. When institutions of excellence in the country start going abroad, believe me, in the business of foreign policy, I now just have a huge addition to my arsenal. And what I see 10 years from now in Africa, from this one institution, is something very, very transformational. Are the risks of relying on data, on models, on flows, on supply chains, on services which are not yours? Of course there is a risk. There is a risk because whoever is influencing it or controlling it or supplying it, they have an agenda. Everybody in the world has an agenda. So don't expect them not to use it. So part of, when we say Viksit Bharat, when we say Atmanirbhar Bharat, the whole idea is to motivate ourselves, and I say this to all of you, it's particularly your generation, because it's in your lifetime that Viksit Bharat is going to be achieved. That how do we build our systems and our, in a sense, self-reliance? Now again, people sometimes take it to extreme and say, oh, we are going back to the past. We had a protectionist sort of period which didn't work out so well for us. I agree. We had issues in the earlier decades. But that doesn't mean you open up all your doors and windows and let anybody who wants to walk in come into your house. I think we need a kind of a national spirit and a national capability and a national, belief about what we can do. And I give you a very, simple, direct example which relates to people in this room. 5G. This is a country which got its 3G from outside, which got its 4G from outside. But when it came to 5G, we realized the risks of 5G, reliance on 5G from an external provider is so huge that we should make an effort. So today, if you look at telecom, if you look at space, if you look, I'm really very happy that the defense sector today has opened up so much more to innovation and to private enterprise and to creativity. I think these are things we need to do. We should not be insecure. We should not be, hostile to something coming from outside, because at the end of the day we'll be connected, but we need to build our capabilities, and that's what it is about. If I were to pick 3 factors in the near term, let's say in this decade, which would be truly transformational, one would be AI, one would actually be demography. And the third one I still haven't figured out because it's probably a blind spot. But demography is one of the hugely underestimated factors today in the state of the world. Anytime you have some spare time, just look it up. There are going to be societies who are actually looking at a demographic cliff, who are going to struggle with even, forget even replacement rates, they are actually wondering how they're going to keep their economy going. Now, and this is happening at a very time when the other factor, AI, is going to create a very talent-centric existence where human beings will be repurposing themselves in a very potent way and in a very, very impactful way. So you have this very interesting conundrum. There is, on one side, a huge capability that is very visible. It's latent, but it's getting realized every day. But at the end of the day, yes, it requires compute, yes, it requires energy, but it requires talent. On the other side, you will have this very uneven talent pools, talent shortages. So how does the world actually try to balance out this spike in demand which is going to happen with the uncertain availability of it? And the only way is mobility. Now, mobility has issues because particularly irregular mobility can create backlashes. We have seen that happening in some cases. And again, on mobility, the social insecurities which are created by irregular migration, they counter the demands of the economy, the demands of technology. So you will have a scenario where, yes, there will be global mobility of people, but there will also be global mobility of tasking. That in many cases, enterprises or employers or people themselves will say, universities could say this, fine, you are in IIT Chennai, why don't I share this with you and why don't you work on this and let's see how it works between the two of us. So the tasking will also be far more mobile. Now in some cases you can't change it. If you're running an airline, you have to have somebody on a flight. On a cruise ship, you have to have. If you're running a hotel, you need people to manage the hotel. And by the way, each one of these jobs is today seeing enormous mobility. When I travel out, which I do a great deal, one big change I see is I see far more Indians today in different professions and different positions than I have seen ever before in my life. Because that is one sign today of that demand and that mobility which follows. Now, when it comes to researchers, again, I don't think we should look at it as a zero-sum game. It's not like somebody goes out to work means we have lost them. Because experience has actually shown many of the people who've gone out have actually fed back in, triggered, they've been catalysts, they have been contributors, they have been pathways to building relationship. And this is the reality. I mean, the world will not be more autarkic. The world will be more globalized, but within the globalized, the really powerful centers will be, of course, more self-reliant. What will define a pole in a multipolar world is the pole, by its very definition, will be relatively much more self-reliant and sizable than competing nations. So I think this is a reality which awaits us. I see that trend actually growing. Often when we think of global collaboration, we are psychologically inclined to think ourselves as takers. I think we need to gradually grow over that. We are also contributors. Many of the very examples I cited to you, if you have an IIT Madras campus outside India, you are a contributor. If you have a rescue force or a disaster response force which goes out somewhere, you're a competitor. You're a contributor. One of our challenges is going to be today, how do we shape the world, not only economically, not only security and, but also intellectually and in terms of knowledge. And it is, I think, the issue over the horizon that we need to address.